gosh, I don't have my life together. Girl, no one does. Are you one of those people who thought by a certain age you would have your life together? That you'd be able to perfectly balance your social life with your full-time job, working out 4 times a week, drinking a gallon of water every day, reading the Bible at 5 a.m. every morning, keeping your house spotless, all while making very few mistakes? If so, this video is for you. Today we're talking about how God gives us grace in our mistakes. We're humans, we're not perfect. And if we're not perfect, then we're bound to mess up from time to time. And by from time to time, I mean daily. Now before we dive into this, we need to have an understanding of what grace is. I'm sure you've heard of the phrase grace and mercy. And the truth is, they are very similar. For a long time, I didn't know what the difference between them was. But that was until I read about it in the Bible and experienced both of them firsthand. So grace is basically God blessing us and showing us favor when we don't necessarily deserve it. And mercy is God not punishing us or giving us full punishment when we definitely deserve it. So what are some examples of grace in the Bible? Well, one of the most popular examples, I would say, is the story of the Prodigal Son. In Luke 15, verse 11, Jesus starts telling the disciples the parable of the Prodigal Son. So here's a quick summary of the story. So there were 2 sons, right? And the youngest son asked his father for his inheritance, or his share of the estate, while he was still living. Okay, to give some background, I learned about this in church, and I found this was really interesting. So basically, you usually only get your inheritance once your parent dies, right? So to ask for your inheritance while they are still alive is kind of like, forget you, wish you were dead, I just want my money so I can leave, so I can dip. You know, so that was very disrespectful on many levels. So his father gave it to him, and the son went out and squandered all of his money on foolish living. After a famine hit and he had nothing left, he felt he couldn't go back to his father. So he found a citizen to work for, and he worked as the pig feeder. So he was feeding the pigs, the slop, and all that good stuff, right? This poor kid was starving, and he longed to eat what the pigs were eating, but no one would give him anything. He suddenly had a come-to moment and realized that his father's servants had more to eat than he did. So he humbled himself and went back home. When his father saw him in the distance, he ran to him and kissed him. The son said, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." But the father, he paid this no mind. He told the servants to bring the best robe, a ring, and sandals to put on the son. He also told them to go prepare the fattened calf for a feast. Now there's a bit more to the story, but for the purposes of this video, we're going to stop there. The prodigal son thought he had his life together. It turns out, however, he did not. A lot of us are like the prodigal son. We go out, we make mistakes, often thinking we know what we're doing. Then reality hits us like a Mack truck and we come crawling back to God. But God is like the Father in this story. He wants us to come back to him. He shows us grace and mercy. The Father showed him mercy by not punishing him for his foolish behavior, or basically saying, "Forget you, I want my money." And he showed him grace by lavishing on him gifts and throwing him a whole feast. God does the same for us. Not to say that we're never going to face the consequences of our actions, because that's not what I'm saying. A lot of times, God gives us passes. And thank God for those passes, because we be messing up every day. I know I do. Okay, so another example of God's grace and his mercy is turning Jacob into Israel. Jacob and Esau were brothers, and Esau liked to be out in the wilderness, hunting, doing all this outdoorsy stuff, while Jacob liked to be in the home. He was a mama's boy. He would stay home and be chilling. He was a bit of a trickster and got Esau to sell his birthright for some stew. Now, you may be like, what in tarnation? For some stew? Well, you know what they say, you're not you when you're hungry. But later, in Genesis 32, Jacob wrestles with God, who said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome." So despite Jacob's spotty past, he became the ancestor of Israel. In one of my other videos about imposter syndrome, I'll link it somewhere up here. I never know where it is. But basically, I talk about how God has a reputation of using imperfect people to enact his perfect will. So we see how the prodigal son was imperfect, but his father showed him mercy. Jacob was not perfect. He was a trickster. He had a spotty past, but God made him the ancestor of a whole nation. And so this is something to keep in mind whenever you feel like you're not good enough to be used by God, or that you're not perfect enough. Nobody's perfect. And we see that time and time again in the Bible. Okay, so we're going to talk about a few ways God can use our mistakes. So the first way is he can use it for our learning and our growth. The only way we learn is by making mistakes. You may think failure is the end of the world, but failure is feedback. It's the only way we know what works and what doesn't. And essentially that's how children learn, right? Think about it like this. If you shield a child from making mistakes, they will be totally unequipped for life. Every day of their adult life will be a rude awakening, because they didn't gather that intel when they were young. Scientists fail all the time. Some of the most renowned sports players, I think it was Michael Jordan who said this, most likely, and I'm totally gonna butcher this, but he said something along the lines of, you guys see like all the shots I made, but like you didn't see all the shots I missed, or something like that. But essentially what he's saying is that even though he is this renowned basketball player, he missed a lot of shots. But I'm pretty sure, as most players, as most teams do after games, they watch the footage, they see how they can improve. If you're watching that footage and there's no like mistakes there, then that's great, I'm guessing, like great. But like, how are you gonna get even better if there's nothing to learn from? You know what I'm saying? So I'm not a sports guru, but I thought that was a good analogy. Let me know what you think. So another way God can use our mistakes is by giving us strength and resilience. Doesn't kill you, makes us stronger. I'm sorry. But basically, the more mistakes you make, the easier it is for you to bounce back from them. Think back to your first embarrassing moment, if you can remember it. I can't remember mine. I probably buried that so deep. But chances are, now that you're older, something like that won't feel as debilitating. For example, in my junior year of high school, I took physics. Now, when I say physics kicked my butt, I mean it. I would fail tests back to back, no matter how hard I tried. And at first, as someone who really cares about their grades, this made me feel so down, so bad. I think it also had to do with the fact that it was online because of COVID, but anyway, it was just not a fun experience. However, looking back, now that I have some experience under my belt, I think this was a very good lesson, because those weren't the last tests I failed. But now when that happens, which is rarely ever, it doesn't feel like the end of the world. Rather, it feels like a learning experience. Going back to the first point. And I am definitely stronger because of those mistakes. Okay, a third way God can use our mistakes is our testimony. Woohoo! Your testimony has power. Why? Well, think about why brands use testimonials. To show how clients or customers were in one undesirable place and are now in a better one because of their product. If a skincare brand uses the testimony of someone who's never had skin problems, that's not going to have as big as an impact as someone who struggles with acne for years. So embrace your imperfections and learn to be kinder to yourself. You could really be helping other people by sharing your journey, by sharing how many mistakes you made, how you overcame them, and how they weren't the end of the world. Okay, another thing I wanted to talk about really briefly is God's grace in the little things. Because as of late, I've really been seeing God showing up in my life, even in the little things. I think a lot of times as Christians, like sometimes it could be both ways. Now let me not get ahead of myself. Sometimes we only go to God with the big things, right? Like, oh my gosh, Lord, please heal someone in my family. Please help me to get into this school or get this job or whatever it may be. And that's awesome. But sometimes we may forget, if you're like me, sometimes I forget that I can go to God with the very small things. For example, like, Lord, when I'm on my way to school, like, can you let the bus not be so crowded today? And then he shows up and he shows out. And then I get on the bus and it's only like 4 people. And I'm like, I love you. Thank you. You know, so just seeing God in those everyday things, I feel like that has helped me so much more to feel connected to him, to feel his presence, to feel like he's really a friend, you know? Because when you go to people for like only the big things, like, okay, but to be able to share the small things with someone, that's what really grows intimacy, you know? For example, I do the laundry on Fridays and I go to the laundromat, and this one time I was a little behind schedule. I usually try to get there at like 9:30. Yeah. I was running late for reasons, and I was kind of anxious because I was like, I know it gets crowded. I don't want to be here all day. I don't want to have to wait for a machine forever. So I was like, God, if you could please show me favor and help me out when I get there, that would be so amazing. That would be greatly appreciated. So I leave. I'm on my way there, right? I arrive and my normal section, the normal machines that I use, were being used, right? So I was like, okay. So I go around to the other side and there are 3 machines there waiting for me. And I'm like, Lord, thank you so much. Like, that was such a relief. And then once the clothes were finished washing, it was time to dry. All the dryers were taken up, right? As soon as my washing machines finished, someone came and started taking their clothes out of the dryers. And now I'm over here like, what's going on? Hello? And not done yet, okay? As I am going to start putting my stuff in the dryers, right? This lady, she waves me down. She's like, I'm like, yes. And she leaves a machine for me. She takes her stuff out. Oh, great. You know, like another machine. Perfect. But then I look closer and I realize she also left time on the machine for me. Like, I had money, you know, like I had enough to do my clothes. But that was so sweet of her. And at this point, I'm like starting to tear up because I'm like, God, like, you see me, you know? And it may sound a little corny, but it's just so nice to see God moving even in the little things. Like, you don't have to be afraid to go with him for like the minute things. Don't think that he doesn't care about that. He wants to have that intimate relationship with you. He wants to show you his grace, his favor. And you don't have to be perfect in order to earn it. Because again, God's goodness is based on him, not us. We can't earn his love. There's nothing we can do to earn it. He just freely gives it to us. So we have to accept that and learn to live in that and be okay with it. Because why wouldn't we be okay with it? All right, so to close, oh, that was cool. Oh well. Stop being a perfectionist. You don't have to have your entire life together. I'm not saying to not strive for organization, for a good system, but in your striving for that, give yourself some grace for your mistakes and accept God's grace. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe so we can continue growing in the faith together. Okay? Okay. Let me know in the comments if you resonated with anything I said. Have a blessed day and I will see you in the next one. Peace.